So, a very, very warm welcome. And just for the sake of the recording, this is the third of our five teachings on the 5 stages of the path. So let's start today in the very, very best way, the same way we started the first time and the second time, which is with a good motivation so that we make good karma in this hour and a half when we're together. As you know, we do that through having a wonderful mind. Although what we're doing physically, just parked in front of a screen, is harmless and pretty good. And what we're doing with our speech is okay, because most of you are silent. So body and speech are okay, but our mind is what will make this session together a wonderful karma. And as you know, then the mind needs to be good in 3 ways. It needs to be a big mind. Big means inclusive, including more and more beings, very, very specially including, excuse me, whether they're living or dead, all the people who've been prominent in our lives. They are our karma. They'll be back in future lives. They are part of us because the interaction with them has shaped our own psychology. And they are very important because they, more than anything else, teach us what this word sentient beings means. And seeing as our whole path is dedicated to helping sentient beings, then the discovery of quite what that means is something amazing. It's amazing. So we're very grateful to those who've helped us, those who've hurt us, doesn't matter. We learn. Everyone with time becomes our guru. Everything becomes the guru. So we include everyone. And then in a more abstract sense, our mind goes out to everyone in this world, all the sentient beings, the animals, the insects, and other worlds, and invisible beings and spirits and all sorts. But that's imagination. The ones who've been real in our life are very important. And then big mind also becomes a big loving mind because we try and feel the same love for each of those that we're including as we've felt for the person we've loved the most in this life. Or the animal. Sometimes, it's a dog or a cat or a horse. Bajriga. So we try and feel love toward each and every sentient being, caring for them, wanting them to be well and safe, to have good health, friendship, all the good things of life. And then a happy mind because we have Dharma. And there is nothing more precious. Dharma is forever. Everything else comes and goes. So with that good motivation, then we turn our hearts in loving care to everyone and think we're here to learn the Dharma, to benefit ourselves and to benefit them. Sonje Chodon Soji Chonomla Jancho Badu Dane Chapsunche Dagi Jinso Jipe Sanamji Rola Penchera Sanje Druparansho Semchen Tamche Dewa Dong Dewe Jodong De Barajoche Dongal Dong Dongal Ji Jodong Tralwara Joche Dongal Mepe Dewa Tampa Dong Men Tralwara Joche Nyeren Chadan Netan Shalwe Tanyom Chempo La Nepara Jorachi Palden Tsawe Lama Rinpoche Dagi Chewara Pende De Shola Kadrin Chempo Gone Jesonte Kuson Tuje Mertrup Saundo Sol. Well, let me just check this. Okay. We are, in theory, according to the program, and please don't sue me, today in our third talk, which was advertised as being about the third stage, the stage of insight. But as I said in the first talk, we probably won't stick to that program, because what is closest to us, the first stage, the stage of accumulation, is very real for us. It has lots of interesting details. And as we move up through the next stages, we are more looking at what will happen to us sometime in the future and what has happened to bodhisattvas and others in the past. It's more theoretical, and also it's harder for us to imagine, because the whole point of a path, a journey, is that we will change. And just now we have our history, we have our mindset that we've inherited from past lives, from this life. We only have an imagination capable of receiving information in terms of the experiences we've had. Experiences we haven't had yet are very hard for us to imagine. So although we do need to study about the later stages of the path, it's very important that I communicate some essential points about what is real for us just now, our conduct in life, the way we meditate, what wisdom does and doesn't mean, what shunyata, voidness, does and doesn't mean. This is very, very important. And the whole path is a development of wisdom and compassion. So I'd like to pick up from last week, still in the first stage, the stage of accumulation. Now, at the end, I did go on to the stage of fusion or integration. But let's go back to the top end of this first stage, which is called accumulation. And if you remember, of the 12 factors of enlightenment, then the last 4 were to do with developing shamatha. And I made the very important point that shamatha in itself, stilling the mind, concentrating the mind, is not necessarily spiritual. It's technical. You do things with your mind, results come out of it. They can be used for good, they can be used for evil, they can just have their own natural consequence, which is to be born in the Deva realms. So we need to be very clear about that, and I'd like to develop that a little bit as well. So I just want to, yes, good. So when we study meditation, usually when we use the word meditation, we are talking about shamatha, concentration meditation. Then in Gampopa's teachings, which we're focusing on now, it says there are 3 ways of doing concentration meditation. There's a worldly way, which brings worldly results. In other words, worldly means within the context of karma, cause and effect, causing you to be reborn. So we can settle the mind, focus it to the point of being totally absorbed. I'll come to that in a minute. And that technically brings the results that we get used to absorption. It's a very powerful state of mind. And so when you die, the karma of that would take you into that state of mind for a long time. It would be very pleasant, but it wouldn't last forever. And when you drop out of it, you get whatever karma you've got left. So you can go from a total absorption for thousands of years, it says, into an animal rebirth. We don't want that. So we must realize that just settling the mind can be not helpful. So there's the worldly way of shamatha. And then there's the transcendent way of shamatha, where it becomes a tool, very necessarily backed up, supported by other tools like right motivation, learning the Buddha Dharma, longing for nirvana, feeling revulsion with samsara and suffering and so on, where it's combined with other tools to get us out of the cycle of rebirths to a definitive liberation. And here we're mainly looking at what we call the Sravaka path, these days embodied in the Theravada teachings, where the whole point is to get yourself out of suffering forever. Get yourself out of suffering and its causes. So that's called a transcendent way of practicing shamatha. And then there is a third way, which is the best transcendent way of practicing shamatha, where it becomes a tool supported by other tools. Now, in this case, that is bodhicitta, loving kindness, compassion, and bodhicitta, and all the tools that a bodhisattva develops. And then shamatha becomes part of the process of not just freeing your own mind, but of acquiring the skills to help others free their minds. So when we look at the 5 stages of the path, we look at shamatha. So what does shamatha mean? What are we doing in this highest part of the stage of accumulation? We are learning to practice shamatha. Shamatha has a very clear definition, which is to keep the mind one-pointedly where you want it in virtue. To maintain the mind where you want it, one-pointedly in virtue. So when we look into that, when we start, our mind is all over the place. It doesn't go where we want it. It goes where it's always gone through all this lifetime's habits. It's scattered. It's like a monkey. It jumps around. We all know that. And also because of habits from past life. So we take that mind, and by using the very simple method of holding the mind on a focus, then we break the habit of the mind going hither and thither. We fix the mind. And then there are many ways of doing this. We have external focus. It can be an object, a tree, a candle flame, a stone. Internal focus, your energies, something you visualize in your third eye. There can be sacred focus, where we focus on seed syllables or Buddha statues, something that, besides holding the mind in one place, has a nice input to our stream of consciousness. There can be non-sacred focus. And then as our shamatha gets better, there can be shamatha without a focus, whereby we just go into the peace and remain there and cultivate it more and more. So usually there's focus. And the more we stay with the focus, then the more the habits can't catch us. So this is what we're doing. And now this is quite curious. It's quite interesting, because the process of stilling the mind to a greater and greater degree, because what happens at first, you feel so peaceful. And then once you're used to that peacefulness, you realize there's a lot going on the surface, under the surface. And once you've dealt with what's under the surface, and that's calm, you realize there's even more subtle stuff. So it's quite funny. We analyze the stilling of the mind in 9 levels. You ready for it? Gross, gross, middling, gross, subtle, gross, gross, middling, 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 subtle, middling, gross, subtle, middling, subtle, subtle, subtle. So first we get rid of the gross, gross. We think we're sweet and calm, and then we find middling, gross, and then so on and so on and so on and so on. We're getting down to the point where just the first flickers, the first thoughts that would have distracted us come up, and then immediately we're not pulled into them. We're back with our focus. So as we work with this, then the mind becomes absorbed. Now, the story of this in the Theravada teachings these days, in the basic teachings of the Buddha, is very, very well described. And the funny thing is that although in Mahayana, and in the special aspect of Mahayana, which is Vajrayana, although we don't follow this path because it could take many, 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 many lifetimes. We nevertheless use the Shravaka teachings as a basic description because it is universal. For the worldly path, the transcendent path, the best transcendent path, it's simple. The mind is becoming more and more still, can pass more and more time in a more and more subtle level of peace. So we use that as a basis. The way it's described, and maybe you've encountered in the Theravada teachings, is as the four, when the Theravada teachings, they're called jhanas, Jhana, and in the Mahayana teachings in Sanskrit, they're called dhyanas. Now, we won't go into them, they're complicated, but you get 17 different resulting stages of your mind being perfectly held in peace. But the point is, the word dhyana means absorption, and absorption means that your mind is no longer drawn out through the senses. It's not distracted through seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching. Mind is held within mind. This is the result of shamatha. Mind held within mind. So once the mind is absorbed within mind, and absorbed means it's not distracted, it becomes very deep. When we do look at the details, we see there are 4 main levels. First dhyana, second dhyana, third dhyana, fourth dhyana. Now, what's interesting for us, even though we're not going to go on that many lifetimes journey of stilling and stilling and stilling more and more, is to see what happens. In the first dhyana, there are 4 things present. So you have absorption, but along with the absorption, there is physical well-being. It's called bliss. So you feel really good because you are so settled that your whole body is blissful, it's balanced, it's settled, things are all lined up. And once they're all lined up, then the energies, as they're described in, for instance, the Theravada teachings, are wonderful. You feel like you're flying, you feel so spacious and blissful. So there's physical bliss, well-being. There is mental well-being, where there is such a sublime happiness of peace. There is still thought, intentional thought often, to keep the meditation in place. And there is analysis. Physical well-being, mental well-being, thought and analysis. Now, I'm mentioning that and detouring into that because so many people, when they meditate, if their body feels blissful and if their mind feels peaceful and blissful, they'll say, this is a good meditation. From the bodhisattva point of view, no way. You've put in place causes, technical, mechanical causes, where you've settled your mind, you've settled your body, and it feels so good. You think this is spiritual. My own teacher, Akon Rinpoche, used to say, if that's what you're after, not only are you not really on the right path, but he said, why don't you just go to a beach or go to a massage parlor? It's so much easier rather than sit for weeks and months or years until you get this. Just go and lie in the sun. You'll feel spaced out and blissful in your mind. Your body will be so relaxed. Or get on a massage table until you feel it. So it takes minutes there, not years. So please understand this mindset where you think, oh, I had a great meditation because I was peaceful and blissful and I felt so good. No, it's a sign that you are more settled. That's good, but it's not where we're going. So in the second dhyana, they reach a state where there is no more intentional thinking. There is no more analysis, there is still the physical and the mental well-being. And then in the third dhyana, the mental well-being is binned. The whole point of getting into the third dhyana is to go beyond mental well-being, because when the mind is that subtle, equanimity is so much more rewarding, meaningful than cause-provoked happiness. And then in the fourth dhyana, there are none of those four things. So I wanted to mention that so that we ask ourselves the question, well then, why are we doing shamatha? And it's very clear. In the Bodhisattva path, we are doing it as a tool, amongst others, to help us cultivate wisdom and compassion. What we call wisdom means voidness wisdom, and that's why we are coming on to this stage of fusion or integration, where we look at the wisdom that will be breathed into our shamatha practice. So now let's assume that we've practiced shamatha in the right context. We've got to the end of the stage of accumulation in this idealized template. So then the next stage is called fusion or integration, or some word like that. It's a word that's like yoga. It means joining. So actually what joins with our still mind is wisdom. Now the key word here is truth. Truth. So in the transcendent path of the Shravaka tradition, of the Theravada, this means the four truths of realized beings. Now, I don't want to get into linguistics, but you probably saw them all as the four noble truths, which is not quite right. Literally, it means the four great truths of noble beings. Noble beings are those who are out of samsara, definitively. So when you get to that stage, as we'll see in the third stage of the path, then some things are very true for you. So these are the four things which are true, the four great truths for liberated beings, the four truths of the noble ones. It's not an adjective for truth, noble truths. So in that Shravaka path, the transcendent path, then in this stage of fusion, the second phase, one is using the still mind to cultivate insight into truth, the four truths: suffering, the cause of suffering; freedom from suffering, the cause of freedom from suffering. And we could follow that through. In the Bodhisattva path, although those four great truths are by definition included, our search for truth is summed up in what we call the two truths: relative truth and ultimate truth. What is relatively true, which means our own stream of consciousness, our own history, what we perceive as ourselves and what we perceive as the world we experience through our individual karma. It's what you call the world, and which I call your world. You know, what you call the world is your world. And the person next to you calls the world their world. And your world and their world aren't the same. Everyone's in their own world. No one knows what the world is because it doesn't exist. We're only each in our own world. There's no world out there. So relative truth is how reality manifests to you each moment through your karmic history, through your samsara. It's what we call samsara. Samsara is not out there, a place. It is your feeling of you and the way you experience other people and life happening to you. That's what's relatively true. And the ultimate truth is not something else, that somewhere there's paradise, somewhere there's voidness as a state, or God or Buddhas. It's the ultimate truth of that relative experience you have. What's happening to you? It's like a dream. It's a product of interdependence. It's impermanent. It involves suffering. So the four truths are there. Three marks of existence: the no self, the suffering, the impermanence is there. But what we're interested in our bodhisattva teachings, because we care for everyone else, is to understand how each person is in their own world, which they call the world, and the way each person experiences that in their mind is just like somebody experiences a dream. It's like somebody experiences a mirage. It's like somebody's experience when they are under hypnosis, and the other similes the Buddha used. So our understanding of truth is the simultaneity of these two truths. The simultaneity. Some people use this terrible term, co-emergent. I don't like it, but I think some of you may. It doesn't emerge from anywhere. There aren't two things that emerge. It's a translation that was probably very helpful at the time. I think Trungpa Rinpoche coined it. But it means innate. In each moment of our relative experience, there is the innate truth of its voidness, that it has no actual substance of its own. It's an appearance to the mind. And the nature of mind, which is able to make these projections every moment. They don't come from anywhere. They don't go anywhere. In the instant they're there, they're not solid, they're not findable. That nature of mind, which is there at the same time as each moment happens, innate, inseparable from the relative manifestation, is what we are looking to understand, the truth of that, what is ultimately true about each moment of experience and what is our own relative truth. So one key word for what we're doing in this stage of fusion is truth. What's the truth of the matter? What's the truth of you? What the hell is going on? Why am I experiencing this and somebody else experiencing that? And why is it so unfair? Seemingly unfair. And what's the meaning of a word like fair anyway? And so on and so on. What is morality? What is ethics? What's going on? Is there some God up in the sky writing this, putting us through tests? Is it just there's one French philosopher who says the mind produces thoughts like the kidneys produce urine. Are we just these human biological accidents that think, and all the stuff we think is just a load of rubbish anyway? Just like our kidneys pee, our mind produces ideas about existence and God and karma and all the rest of it. What's going on? What is the truth? So that's what the stage of fusion is about. Now, the truth is summed up in the word shunyata. And shunyata means wisdom. And now this is the problem for me. The 5 stages of the path, all we can do is scratch at the surface of so many huge topics. I would love to be able to present shunyata to you in a few minutes, but I'd be daft if I tried. Buddha took about 45 years to get it all across to his wonderful disciples. And I did a course, Voidness for Dummies. Before this, we had a few talks and we just scratched the surface. But if you retain anything, then you know that this stage of fusion is about finding the truth. The truth makes you wise, and the truth is about shunyata, voidness, emptiness. That's what unlocks all the doors. This key of shunyata will undo all the various doors. Now, truth, one word to keep in mind. Now, another word to keep in mind, and so important, middle way. It's about understanding the Buddha's middle way. Now, there are many ways of understanding the middle way. There really are, that are quite helpful. Sometimes it's, not too little, not too much. And if one extreme is white and another extreme is black, then the middle way is sort of gray somewhere. A question of balance, where we have to find some sort of balance between things. Now, in the Prajnaparamita, Bodhisattva teachings, it does not mean a middle point like that. We have to get our head around this meaning of middle, which isn't middle. It's called middle because it is not extreme. We don't fall into the extremes of view, the way we see the world, the way we see ourselves, that would get us into trouble. Sometimes we talk of two extremes. Sometimes we have four very famous extremes we study at deep length through Chandrakirti, Nagarjuna in the Madhyamaka middle way teachings. 8 extremes. But we don't let our mind become extreme. And the fact of not letting it become extreme is described in the scriptures as like going to the edge. We don't go to the edge, but we don't define a center. I hope that's okay. So then let's take the 2 extremes because they're the most important for us. When we start out on our path, our mind is conditioned. We have our narrative. And so the story, narrative means the story you tell yourself of me, happy me, sad me, fortunate me, unlucky me, and so on and so on. It's the way we tell the story. I tell the story of Ken to Ken, the way I feel myself, see myself, place myself in the context of everything. The story of me, and then the story of everything. Everyone in my life, life around me, the Dharma story I've understood so far, the story of everything. So this is the narrative, because life as we experience it, for us, what takes us up, makes us happy, what brings us down, makes us suffer, is the interaction between the story of me and the story of everything. If the story of everything just now corresponds to what I want, me is happy. And if the story of everything, what other people say and do, what life does, what the country politics does and the government doesn't correspond to my idea, then I'm unhappy. So we have this narrative. Now, at the beginning, that narrative is solid and it's very real. We make it more solid and more lasting than it is because we are impermanent. We change all the time. We are an impermanent product of causes and conditions. We are not fixed forever, fixed in stone. But we don't feel like that. We project onto other people in a way which is fixed. We project onto ourselves in a way which is fixed. So that's one extreme. It's called solidification, reification. It's under the word exists, is. Mum is, dad is, Britain is, I am. That's one extreme. Now, to correct that, because that's what's prevalent in most people when they come to Dharma, the expedient Dharma teachings are to say, no, it's not. You don't really exist like that. And everything around you doesn't exist like that. And then we get all of the teachings of Nagarjuna on voidness, which dismantle our solid ideas of existence. If it's done properly, there's no problem. But if the remedy becomes too much, then you can fall into another extreme, which is more dangerous than the first extreme, where you start telling yourself that nothing exists. And you abandon the narrative. You hate the narrative. You reject the narrative, which is your moment by moment experience. And you're telling yourself, it's all empty, it's all empty, it's all empty. No, non-ego, non-ego. What did I think me? Ken? No Ken. Oh, bang, 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 bang. Beat yourself up because you heard about non-ego, and then tell yourself doesn't exist. This is big trouble. This is big trouble. It's not what Buddha meant. It's not what the teachings mean. So Saraha, our great teacher who later reincarnates as the Karmapas, Saraha says, those who believe in reality, in is, are stupid like cattle. But those who believe in isn't, and who label, because it's all about labeling and projecting. Instead of labeling is, then we label isn't. He said they're even more stupid and they're irrecuperable. Dharma can save people in samsara. We can help them be kinder people, be more ethical people, people who can settle their mind, people who can cultivate devotion and all the good qualities. But somebody who's stuck in a denial and a rejection of existence, they can get into an impenetrable box. And especially the teachings of love and kindness can't get through, because how can you love those who didn't exist? So Buddha never meant that. He meant doesn't exist lastingly, permanently. And in Vajrayana, the narrative, what is happening to you, just pressed a funny button on my keyboard. What is happening to you right now is nectar, even if it's pain, even if it's aggression, because this living reality of your relative mind is what will help you find the ultimate truth of that very same mind. So rather than rejecting the narrative, we need to accept and embrace with wisdom the narrative, where we realize what a dreamlike thing it is, how it's the product of our karma, and it's only in accepting it, facing it with all the tools the Buddha gives us wisely, that we can develop these two key qualities of compassion and wisdom. So we don't want to fall into the extreme of isn't or of is. Now, the teachings help us do that. So how does it work? This stage of fusion has 4 levels. And the first one's called warming up. So in this kind of marathon to enlightenment, we have to warm up our muscles a bit and get them moving slowly before we can really get going. How do we do that? Through study. It has to start like that. We have to get the facts of shunyata straight. To learn about things either existing lastingly or not, we have the wonderful teachings of Chandrakirti, entering the middle way. Majjhimakāvatara. Terrific text. To take that further, to understand the lack of solidity of so many of our notions, like movement, like karma, cause and effect being something real, and so on. We need Nagarjuna's teachings, the 27 chapters of Nagarjuna's root verses of the middle way. To take that further, then we need Atisha's lamp for the path for enlightenment. which shows us the actual way our mind will evolve in wisdom. The way others have gone before us, how their minds opened up, their hearts opened up. And then we crown it with the Sangha's teachings on Buddha nature, the reality, the real truth of shunyata, that all the time we've always been pure and perfect. The rest was like a dream, a very important dream, but it comes and goes, comes and goes. Whereas all the time that's coming and going and occupying our mind all the time, there has been this truth of mind, the middle way, which will never change, and which shows that who you truly are is pure love, it's total peace, clarity of wisdom which is unimaginable, and a power to radiate into the hearts of other beings. So we warm up by studying and getting the ideas correct, and then bringing them into our basis of shamatha. Now, what's happened through shamatha? You've been very good at it. You didn't get pulled into the piece so that your mind was parked, as I mentioned last week with Gampopa and Milarepa. You're not just gone into peace and wasting your time. You know how to keep your mind very still. You've mastered your mind. It's no longer distracted. It can be where you want it, in virtue. So now, as we go through the more and more subtle levels of mind, gross, middling, gross, all the way down to subtle, then we apply the teachings on the two truths. The mind that manifests relatively as thoughts and feelings and memories and stuff that comes up, and the truth of that mind. Now, in Mahamudra, the way we do that is through very, very careful shamatha training, outer objects, inner objects, sacred objects, non-sacred objects, formless things, and so on. And then afterwards, we have steps of deepening our awareness. Now, in particular, we do that through first in shamatha, when the mind is so still. Shamatha becomes our laboratory, where mind is so still, we can actually look at it without disturbing it. What on earth is this mind that can produce everything from heaven to hell, from confusion to enlightenment? The Guru's instructions, the Guru's presence help us to go deeper and deeper in vipassana insight until the Guru can help us discover the truth of that mind. So we are at first warming up. And as I said last week, warming means that if truth, the two truths, relative and ultimate, was like a big bonfire. Now, why is it like a bonfire? It's because it burns up all your samsara and your illusions. That sounds good until you start doing it. It becomes quite interesting once you are doing it, because a bonfire is very pretty from far away. When you are actually burning, it's something else. But anyway, I don't want to put you off. But this is what we're talking about. Your illusions are going to have to be busted, broken, in order that you discover the truth. You need help. You need refuge. You need bodhicitta. You need to learn to love yourself. Loving all beings starts with ourselves. You need compassion for yourself. You need forbearance and patience. All the bodhisattva skills. So as you learn technically and intellectually about shunyata and voidness, and you start to apply that to your own case, your own relative and ultimate manifestation, then we warm to the truth, and we warm to the path we're following. And although it can be difficult, we appreciate the difficulty. So as we warm more and more to our Dharma journey of dismantling samsara at the very root of ignorance, which is the opposite of truth. Then gradually this takes us to the second step, second part of this phase, this stage of fusion or integration, which is then called peak. So doesn't mean peak experience. The analogy, you have it in your backup notes, is like the peak of a child's mountain, very conical mountain. So at the bottom of the mountain, you're usually pretty lost in the valleys and the forests and so on. And there is a big bulk of mountain, which is your whole history of karma, of klesha, and all the other obstacles that we are purifying. And there is your history of ignorance, where you haven't opened your mind up to deep insights. As we are applying more and more the teachings of Nagarjuna and Chandrakirti and then of our Guru, and they're coming to life in our meditation, then it's like going up the mountain. The bulk of the past becomes less and the space becomes more. So in the second stage, we are through the power of shunyata, which is the greatest power in your practice, power of wisdom. We are dissolving our past karma. So we go up and up until at the end of this second part, it's like reaching the summit of the mountain, panoramic view. There's very little left to remove your causes of suffering, the way your mind got involved with samsara before and caused trouble for you and everyone else. There's a very great peace. You're close to the sun, to the moon, to the space, to the stars. So that's it's the meaning of the second phase, which is peak or approaching the peak. Now the third phase is called forbearance. Forbearance, often translated as patience, but this isn't about being patient and waiting for it to happen. The word forbearance, in its etymology, means an ability to carry. And actually, the English word cope, being able to cope, is absolutely it. It means that as your delusions crumble in a healthy way, then through the bodhisattva wish, through the loving care you have for yourself and everybody, and so on, and the power of the lineage blessing, and the strength of your shamatha, as your delusions about yourself crumble, you can cope. As an unknown dimension, whereby you are gradually exploding into a world of other beings, you realize that it was insanity to be locked up in an exclusive shell of ego, and that we're all part of each other. And that the whole point is to be nothing but loving care for each other. And that means there's no more me, and territory. And, but I need this, or there's so many things that need to collapse. And then not only that, your understanding of Dharma needs to evolve. So Dharma, we see this in Dharma centers. People come, and what is Dharma? You do this, and you watch Karmapa videos, and you do that, and so on and so on. That's Dharma. And then bit by bit, we realize, no, that's an external shell. There's lots of things not right with it. It's people stuff. It's organized religion stuff. And the Dharma ideas we've understood intellectually, but they've not really sunk in where the pennies drop and, oh my goodness, this is what it really means. So our illusions, even about Dharma, need to change, need to evolve. And for that, studying the life stories of our spiritual ancestors, very, very, very helpful. Somehow it sowed seeds of blessing, whereby even when, I'm going to say, it's not very nice, but when the shit hits the fan, right? When the shit hits the fan, we've got some wonderful examples to follow. Our delusions about ourselves need to crumble, and our projections about other people, Dharma, and the world need to crumble. So the third stage, called forbearance, is like waving goodbye to ego forever. All of ego's, ego is what we call ego is a collective noun. It's not one thing. It's a name for all of the various psychological mechanisms which have kept us in suffering, kept us the victims of the maras, the evil tendencies. So now it's like you are, when people get on a boat to leave a country or a continent, we're on the boat and we're about to wave goodbye. But in order to actually get away, the last bits to let go of can be very, very difficult. It goes very deep. It could be a bit scary. So we need a lot of help, and we get a lot of help for that. The stage of forbearance is being able to cope with the real truth of the matter of existence. What is going on? The real, incontrovertible truth. And so when we've gone through that stage, then the fourth part of this stage of fusion is called the highest worldly thing, because there's work to do still, but you are on the threshold. It's a threshold level of breaking out of samsara forever and into Buddha mind forever. So it's called the highest worldly thing. Now, in this journey through the stage of fusion, warming up, summit, forbearance, highest worldly thing, we have 5 friends. They are 5 factors that we need to use in warming up and summit, but through, and they're the 2 long-lasting, that's the donkey work, they take the time. When we get to forbearance and highest worldly thing, these 5 factors, these 5 tools, these 5 skills are so well honed, they are so familiar, that they become 5 powers, 5 strengths. So it's the same 5 things, but they've changed nature. Now they are part of you. You've not been working to develop them. They are part of your journey in understanding ultimate and relative together. So what are they? They are faith. Faith. So in the first 2 stages, we need to trust Nagarjuna, trust the Buddha, trust our gurus. At the beginning, when they say, "I'm sorry, Ken, you don't exist." You think, what? Really? What they after? What's going on here? And I remember Khenpo Sotin, as in 1977, we were studying this stuff in a chateau in the Dordogne. And Khenpo was an excellent teacher. And one of the students was asking questions, and then Khenpo wouldn't let him go. He kept putting him on the spot. We were all there riveted because the dialogue became amazing. And it was about, you don't exist. There's something fixed. So in the end, the person who was almost spluttering, but said that, but then, what's this? Me talking with you? Who are you? Who am I? And Khenpo looked at him and he used to have his eyes, you could see the whites, and they would open. He said, "This is ignorance talking to wisdom." Not Khenpo talking to the person. So anyway, we need to trust at first. And that's what trust keeps us studying these, what seem like weird notions, things which seem so real. The Buddha's teachings on karma, cause and effect, It's not quite what it seems, that causes make results. When we look into it, millisecond by millisecond, we can't say this makes that. Buddha doesn't say that. He's so clever. In the Rice Shoot Sutra, he says, when there's been this, there'll be that. But he doesn't say this makes that. So when there's been this and that, he held in his hand a rice seed and a rice shoot. He didn't say this makes this, which is the way we think of it, cause and effect. He says, well, when there's been that, and that's long gone, there's no more the seed. When there's been that, there'll always be this. Each moment is unique. The cause is gone, then the results manifest later. We can't find any connecting thread, something somewhere where this made that, but inevitably this happened in the past, this comes up in the future. It's magic. It's amazing. So we need trust to be able to study that enough. So the word could be trust, it could be faith, it could be confidence. They all apply. That's one tool. Another tool is diligence. Now, diligence we saw before, it means delight. We need not just to persist in our studies till we really get it, but we need to delight in what is basically going to kill our ego. It's really funny. You're kind of signing up for an ego euthanasia and you're enjoying it. It's weird. It's weird. So this faculty of diligence, delight in Dharma, is something we need to understand and apply and develop as a tool. There is, in Tibetan it's Drempa, it means recollection or mindfulness, which means that we need the power to more and more keep the Buddha's teaching in mind, remind ourselves where we're going, why we're going there, what our guru said, what the Buddha said, not get lost in samsaric habit. Very, very important recollection, mindfulness. And then deep absorption. Our mind needs not remedial aspirin meditation, but the power to go very, very deeply and quietly into this exploration of mind itself and how it does what it does. And then we need wisdom, not wisdom as intellectual understanding, but we need to cultivate this on-the-spot mind, which is wise about itself and wise about what is happening. It knows very clearly, more and more clearly. So these 5 tools we develop in warming up, we develop in summit stage. And by then, they've become 5 powers. So we have natural diligence, natural mindfulness, the wisdom's there, the power of mastery of mind, to be deeply absorbed, is all there. They take us into the forbearance where the illusions can crumble. We're okay. Your mind is blessed. In our case, in the Kagyu lineage, by your gurus, by the lineage blessing. And this is your refuge. This is your anchor as your illusions of self just crumble, or they're taken apart by the dramatic way the script writers of life write the story. So 5 powers, the same 5. Now that takes us up to the highest worldly point, to the breakthrough, which is called the stage of insight. In the Shravaka teachings, Theravada teachings, this is insight into the 4 truths. Now there, the scriptures get complicated. Well, let's say lots of details. And there are various ways of describing 16 breakthroughs, 4 for each truth, 4 for the truth of suffering, 4 for the truth of causes of suffering, 4 for the truth of freedom from suffering, 4 for the truth of the path. And so through this bringing wisdom into a healthy shamatha, the mind will actually break through, and the truth will be evident, not known intellectually. We can do that. If you're bright, you can go to a week retreat of Buddhist studies. You'll understand the truth of suffering, the truth of causes of suffering. Makes sense. We're not talking about that. You are so still in meditation, so quiet, and the whole way that ego works and gets you into trouble is so obvious. I can't say it. There's not a word to describe it. You feel it, you smell it, you taste it. It's so blooming obvious. There is no doubt about it at all. And so, like that, there are 16 details, sometimes in the Theravada teaching. Sometimes they're phrased differently. In the Mahayana view of what goes on, when we talk about 16 steps of insight, then we talk about 8 forbearances and 8 insights. I don't want to get lost in that because you need to study more to really see what's going on here. But I do need to cover it just so that I don't lose my job or get sued. So we've got the 4 truths. So for the first truth, suffering. What is suffering? There is first a forbearance whereby you have to face that clearly, squarely. So we have to overcome. Forbearance means overcoming all the obstacles to that. Not being diverted, not being frightened, facing what suffering is. There is forbearance. And through that, we will get insight into suffering. But our insight into suffering is based on our own work, on our own human mind. But once we've got it, then there is another stage, forbearance again, which is coming to terms with the suffering that's in all the other non-human realms. We extrapolate or extend from our own experience into an understanding of the whole of life and its suffering. There's a forbearance where we have to face that, and then there's the actual insight. Forbearance, insight, further forbearance, further insight for the truth of suffering. And it's the same for the other 3 great truths. So these are called 16 moments, but the word moment in the Buddhist scriptures doesn't mean a moment, like on a watch. The shortest moment is 1/64th of a finger snap. The longest moment is the time it takes you to get enlightened, which can be several cosmic eons. A moment is the time something takes. The time something takes. However long that may be. So the time it takes to go through those 16 steps. Now in Mahayana, it said these 16 moments are accomplished in one moment, which means they're not worked through one after another like a syllabus. It means you get it. Your mind awakens to Buddha mind. And in this idealized template where everything's so neat and clear, it means that you definitively leave the samsaric mind and you go into Buddha mind. It becomes what we might call these days your default state. We flip over from a default ego, somebody practicing, learning about shunyata, Buddhas, refuges, and all of that, where you feel like you. Now that flips, and you are the vastness of everyone and everything. And what was you is still there as a history on the surface to be dealt with, but your default feeling is the love and compassion and wisdom and peace of Buddha mind. So when that breakthrough happens, it's the best moment ever. best moment ever. Once it's happened, it's done. You spend all of your Dharma journey through maybe many lifetimes to get there. And then, so it's called overwhelming joy, tremendous joy. Everything you've been longing for, working for, praying for, at last it happens. And your default state is the presence of all the what were before refuges. That becomes you. Your mind is a refuge. At that time, we call it the first bodhisattva level. The insight, so it's called the stage of insight, is definitive. One breakthrough that includes all 16 steps. But in Mahayana, rather than the 16 steps of the four truths of noble beings, it is a real understanding of the middle way, the truth of the matter, the inseparability of relative and ultimate. There's no ultimate over there. There's no voidness, which is some big blank somewhere, some Buddha world. It's the truth of every moment, every moment. It's always been there as the truth of every moment. So that's the insight. And I think next time we'll pick up there and we'll look, because today we had 5 factors of enlightenment, which helped, which became 5 strengths. So we had 10 factors of enlightenment. Now we've got 7 that are there in this phase of insight. Quite honestly, it's more of a scholarly thing, because when it happens, the breakthrough, it happens. It happens. So quite what went on, scholars can look back and say, oh yes, well, there must have been this, there must have been that, 7 factors. But it's not as though we're working on 7 things. Those 7 things you've been working on for years and years. They just come into play. 7 things come particularly into play at that moment of insight. So I think that's a good place to stop, because in past weeks there wasn't a terrific amount of time for discussion or for questions. I'd like to give a little bit more today. So let's dedicate, why not now, all the goodness of the formal teaching. Then we can relax together and discuss it. Sonam diye tamche zikpane, topne nyepe drana pomjine, je gana chipalap, trukpaye, zipit sole, drowa resho, janchob semcho rinpoche, ma jepa nam je jorchi, jepa nyampa mepa ta, kongne, kongdu, pelwaresho.